Hey guys, this is going to be my comprehensive base suspension setup video. This is going to apply to every other suspension video I may do in the future. It's going to cover a lot of different bikes because I'm going to go through all the basics with you, but this is specifically also going to show what you need to do for your 2017 FZ09/MT09 or any other bike that is really similar to this. Now this particular bike has a very good range of adjustability. It's not fully adjustable. There are certainly aftermarket options that you can do both for the forks and the shock to give you more adjustability. Race bikes are certainly going to have a lot more adjustability, but many bikes out there have a lot less than this. There is a wide range of what you can do with your suspension settings. Cruisers, for example, you may only have a little bit of preload adjustability on the rear shock, and that's it. Nothing on the front. No rebound, no compression, it is what it is. Cruisers are made for cruising down the road. Race bikes are made for making lots of tiny little minutia adjustments to get you that perfect setup. Most bikes, like this one, are somewhere in the middle. So to get started, we only need a few simple things. You need a pen and paper. We're going to be writing down a lot of measurements and doing some very simple math. There's nothing to be scared of. I'll give you some guideline numbers that I go by. There are other suggestions out there. It's a bit of trial and error, it really is. Take these suggestions and instructions with a grain of salt, go out on the road, and make your absolute final decisions based on how your bike feels to you. We're going to need the owner's manual, or at least some information from it. If you don't have your owner's manual, you can download a PDF for free from just about all of the manufacturers out there, or just Google online for the specifications that we're looking for. It's widely available. There's nothing secret about what we're doing. First and foremost, it is a huge myth that bikes are set up right or properly off the showroom floor or from the factory. That couldn't be further from the truth. Bikes that have adjustability in their suspension have that feature so that you can dial it in to get your very best setup for your particular riding conditions and your weight. That's the entire point of having the adjustable suspensions. So the two things we're looking for: number one, we are looking for the total wheel or suspension travel for the front and the rear. It'll be named one or the other. Usually you just flip to the back to the specification section, and in this case we're looking for the rear wheel travel, which is listed at 5.1 inches, and the front wheel travel, which is listed at 5.4 inches. Boom. Those are the two figures we need. That's the important bit done out of the owner's manual. The next thing you need is the only special tool, but you probably already have it for free. This is for adjusting the preload on the rear shock. Not all bikes are going to need it or even have it available, but if you have it, it's probably in your toolkit underneath your seat that came with your bike. You may not even know it's there. You may have seen this and not known what it's for. This is for simply turning an adjustment ring on the shock absorber. Sometimes they're one piece, sometimes they're two piece, depends on the bike. If you don't have this and you end up needing one, they're very cheap, under $5 on eBay. Not a big deal. For adjusting the preload on the front forks, you will need a ratchet extension and appropriately sized socket, or sometimes your bike will just have thumb screws. It really depends on your bike setup. That's why it's important to check your setup in the owner's manual. And for adjusting rebound and compression damping controls, both on front and back, usually all you need is a flathead screwdriver. The only other tool here we need is a tape measure. Really simple. You're also going to need a helper for just at least a little part of this, if not the whole thing, for safety. That's going to be up to you, depends on your size and the size of your bike. That's your call. So suspension setup is in two major parts. First is setting the sag. That's how much the suspension is compressed just with sitting on it, called rider sag. There's another type called static sag that we'll be talking about briefly. Next is setting your damping, both compression and rebound. Not all bikes are going to have both compression and rebound. If you have anything, it's probably going to be rebound. I've never seen a bike that only has compression. That's usually the last option that's added, and the more precise race bikes will even have two different types of compression, usually just on the rear shock. But most bikes out there, you're going to have rebound and compression damping on the front, and probably rebound on the rear. On a bike with a chain, it's very important that that chain is properly set for slack before you do anything, because that can obstruct the motion of the rear suspension if it's too tight. Too loose, it won't affect the reading, but of course you want your chain slack properly anyway. So make sure that's set correctly for your bike before you start. So let's talk sag. Sag is simply making your suspension work in the middle of its range. It doesn't do anybody any good if you have a suspension that's all the way topped out trying to work. It can't go the other way if it's already topped out. Likewise, you don't want it bottomed out. You won't be able to use the suspension. The suspension has a range. That's the front and rear wheel travel or suspension travel that we looked up. We want to be able to work somewhere around the middle of that range, ideally. So it's very important to set up your bike as a baseline correctly. There are magic numbers. You can use between 25 and 30% of your wheel travel, your suspension travel, as your rider sag. That means when you get on the bike, just sitting there, your suspension should be compressed 25 to 30% of its travel. That puts it in that great magic range. Now this is only for street. This is not for a track setup. I don't do any kind of track setups, just street. So that's a great number for the street. We're going to be shooting for 30% today. So I've got my info sheet here. I'll put a blank template in the description below this video so you can copy, paste, and print it out yourself to work off of. The first thing we write in is the information that we know. We put in our front and rear total travel available. That's going to be our base number. Then we're going to calculate our target sag numbers for both front and rear off of that, figuring 30%. Now, if you have upside down forks in the front, we're actually going to be calculating 70% because what we're measuring is the total suspension travel left, since we're going to be measuring that gap between the fork seals and the bottom of the fork itself. On the rear, we're actually going to be measuring the suspension travel, so we're going to be looking at the actual 30% number. Now, on this particular bike, the 2017 FZ09, I have a front total travel of 5.4 inches. Our 30% target is 1.6 inches, so we're looking for it to compress 1.6 inches just sitting on it, which means we should have 3.8 inches showing left on the fork. So that's what we're going to be measuring for. Similarly, on the rear, we have a total travel of 5.1 inches. 30% of that, we are looking for a target of 1.5 inches. So we'll be measuring to see how much it compresses in the back, shooting for that 1.5 inches. And that's the part we need a helper for, just to take a quick measurement with a tape measure and make an adjustment to the shock preload if needed. Now, I've done a basic setup on this. I will be running things in and out to show you differences, however. The other thing that's important is write everything down as it is now. So that way, if you make any mistake, if you change things and look, you just don't like it, you screwed something up, it doesn't feel right, it's in the wrong position, that's okay, because you wrote it down and you can simply return it to exactly where it was later. This is a no-risk operation. This is simply using the controls that you've already paid for and have in your bike, and it can really transform the way the bike feels and handles on the road. It can turn a bike into something so much more fun depending on how far out it was for you. And it does make a big difference. Little tiny adjustments here make big differences on the road. I'm not kidding. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is get a baseline. This will allow us to return to these settings that we are currently at any time. So like I said, no risk. Then we're also going to count how much of a total range we have in our various controls so that we know, are we in the middle? Are we near one extreme or the other? Somewhere in between? That's what we want to know. So for front preload on the forks, you're usually, I've never seen this otherwise, going to have equal controls. You're going to have one nut to turn on both forks. It's very important that you do them equally. They both must be set identical. You never want one fork under more tension than the other. Should be obvious, but you never know. So find your controls. In this case, it's a 14 mil socket needed to turn these very top nuts. And what we're going to do is count the number of turns out until it lightly stops. That will tell us what we're at. So we're going to write that number down. That'll tell us how many turns, and I count in half turn revolutions. that we're at now. After we get that base number, we will then go all the way in, and that'll give us our total range. So, half, 1, half, 2, half, 3, half, 4, half, 5, half, 6, half, 7, half, 8, half, 9, half, 10. We are at 10 turns out, so that's our baseline number. I'm going to go ahead and write that down right now. Now we're going to go ahead and count and run it all the way in and see what our total range is. Half 1, half 2, half 3, half 4, half 5, half 6, half 7, half 8, half 9, half 10. This is where we were. Half 11, half 12, half 13, half 14, half 15, half. So 15.5 is your total turn adjustment for front free preload. So we're approximately 2/3 of the way into our preload as it was set. Now, like I said, this isn't off showroom. I've already done a base setup on the spike. Off the showroom, it was actually backed all the way out. Very soft. And as an example of that, I'll show you what the typical showroom setting is compared to correct as soon as we get done with this baseline. For compression and rebound damping, we are doing the opposite. We are going to count in until it seats. That will give us our baseline for each of those. Again, consult your manual to see what your controls are. In this case, we have rebound damping on the right fork, and it's simply a flathead screw in the center, and compression damping on the left. So you don't have both controls in both forks, hence it's not a fully adjustable suspension, but you at least do have both controls. They just split it one to the other. So we're going to count in. We're going to do rebound damping first on the right, and this goes in clicks on this particular bikes. Not all of them are, but most of them will have an audible and feelable click. That's what you count. 1, 2, 3, 3. When you get fully seated, it won't give a click. It just kind of gives a gummy little feeling. Back it out to the first actual click. That's the baseline. So we're at 3 clicks out for rebound. I'm going to write that down. Likewise with compression, we're going to count the clicks in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. So we're at 5 clicks out. I'm going to write that down. Now we just need to run them both all the way out and count the clicks to give us our total range. Starting with rebound, and they should be the same, usually on the forks at least. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So we've got 14, and I already measured the compression. I know they're both 14. So that's our total range. We can write that down. So we know that on rebound damping, we're almost all the way in, just as a baseline. And compression, we were more towards the middle, but still on the firm side. The more clicks in that you have these turned, the firmer it is. Rebound damping controls the speed at which the front forks rebound, extend back up. Compression damping is controlling how fast the front forks collapse. Think of it as a hydraulic spring working in conjunction with the physical springs. Rebound damping we will be able to easily measure and set. Compression damping does require a little bit of on-road time and some fine adjustments. It is to taste to some degree because this is what controls your plushness of the ride. If you have no compression damping, you have a soft, floaty kind of ride, more like a cruiser. Whereas if it's run all the way in, it gets rock hard. There is a point where it's too hard. It's not like the faster you go, or if you're on a track, you just dial it all the way in. That's not the way it works. There is a magic range there where it's working well to be comfortable and working well to soak up and absorb the bumps without having the suspension float over them and lose great contact with the road. Usually compression damping controls are ending up right near the middle of the range. So that's usually a good starting point. Then go out on the road, and we'll talk about some quick little tests you can do to make 1, 2, 3 click adjustments on the road while you test. And that's it. Super easy. So the first thing we have to do before we set our damping controls is set our sag, because they are affected by your preload. So what we want to do here is just take a simple zip tie, put it around the fork, and we're going to bring it down around the inner tube and just lightly cinch it down. You want it to stay in place but still be able to slide easily. So that's good. It can slide. We're going to put it all the way up against the top so that we know it's at that level. And now what we want to do is either have a helper look or just look down with your head to get a general idea of how much gap we're going to open up. We're going to tilt the bike back on the side stand to release all the tension off the front suspension so that it can top out. That's all we're doing. And we can see that there might be about 3/4 of an inch. That's about it. So that's okay. That's exactly what we want to see. Just a little bit, something of static sag. 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, doesn't really matter exactly what it's at. We just want to know that the bike itself is affecting the suspension sitting there. Cool on the front. We do the same thing with the back, but all we have to do is grab the rear frame. Make sure you're not grabbing a fairing or anything that moves. Grab the rear frame, same thing. Tip it up a little bit. Look at the rear tire. Make sure you see some movement. That's all we're looking for. Maybe 1/4 inch? Perfect. We're at least in the ballpark. Okay, so we're okay now, at least starting out with static sag. Now we can measure rider sag. Front is super easy. Just snug the zip tie back up towards the top. Get on the bike lightly. Let yourself settle. Get off. And we're going to measure how much distance is left from that zip tie to the bottom. So we're going to be measuring the gap, looking for that magic number that we targeted in the beginning. You want to balance yourself on the bike and get all your weight off your feet. You don't want to be putting any pressure holding yourself steady because the bike does come up slightly. So just balance there for a second, let the suspension fully compress to your weight, and gently get back off. So to show you the differences, I have all the preload removed. The preload is turned all the way out. There's no additional preload on the front fork springs. So now I'm going to get on it and we will measure and see where our rider sag is now on the front. What you want to do is get on, lift your feet up briefly. You just don't want to have it artificially adjusted by having too much pressure on your feet, and you don't want to bounce on it because that'll force that zip tie down. So then gently get back off. We'll take a look at that distance. So our target range was 3.9 inches showing. We're going to measure from the top of that zip tie down to the bottom of the fork. And with 0 preload, this is, again, as it comes from the showroom, typical on most bikes, we are at 3 3/4 inches. And that's for a 250-pound rider. Meaning we need to come up roughly 1/4 inch. A little bit less would be ideal. So the first thing I'll do is return it to where it was when we started. That was 10 turns in on the preload. We'll remeasure and see where we're at. 1/2, 1/2, 2, 1/2, 3, 1/2, 4, 1/2, 5, 1/2, 6, 1/2, 7, 1/2, 8, 1/2, 9, 10. Do the same thing to the left. Reset the zip tie, get back on, remeasure. Now at 10 turns in, we are currently at 4 inches. So that's actually a little too much. We gained a good solid 1/4 inch. We were looking for a little bit less. We came in 10 turns. I'm going to come out, say 3, and we'll see where we're at there. spot on at 3.9 inches. That's exactly where we want to be. So now we're going to write down our final number, which was, what did I come back out? Oh, I can't remember. This is why we write stuff down. I was at 10, I came back out 3, so we're at 7. 7 is our final front preload adjustment for this particular bike for my weight. To set the rear sag, it's very similar to the front in that we are going to measure the suspension travel, but we're doing it the opposite. Instead of measuring distance left in suspension travel, we're actually going to measure how much the rear wheel physically travels. And we do that by taking a measurement directly from the axle nut or the axle itself, depending on your particular bike, up to a fixed point on the bike. This can be part of the fairing, it can be a decal, it can be anything that's very accurate and distinctive that is more or less directly in line with the rear axle. And this is why you need a helper, because they will be actually taking the measurement while you're on the bike to look at your rider sag. First thing we have to do is set a baseline. I'm going to put the tape measure right here on the bottom of the axle, centered, and then there's a nice sharp point right here, part of the black plastic fairing, and it's almost directly above the axle. And that's a nice, easy reference point. So I'm going to take a measurement and see where we're at right now. And this is our baseline. Currently, it's reading 22.5 inches. So we're going to go ahead and write that number down. And as noted at the beginning, our target for the rear sag is 1.5 inches. So we're looking for that number to hit 21 inches exactly. Now the preload adjustment on the rear shock varies. It depends on your bike. There are two main types that are very common. One is a ramp type setup where you have a physical ring underneath the spring, and it's kind of like a ratchet where you turn it a little bit and it forces the spring up to a step. That will have a distinctive number of ramps available. Look in the owner's manual, see what's available. In this particular bike, it has 7 available total. And it's set at number 5 right now. All you have to do is visually look at it. Sometimes they're numbered 1 through whatever. Sometimes you just have to count until one end or the other to tell where you're at. This one is set up number 5 out of 7 right now, so it's on the firm side, again, as a rough setup for my 250-pound frame. Usually it's going to be set up pretty soft off the showroom floor. So now I need to go get my wife because she just needs to take a quick measurement while I sit on the bike. We'll see where we're at, how close we are, and if needed, adjust that step. The other common type of setup is an infinitely adjustable pair of rings that operates much the same as the front forks. You'll have a top locking ring so the bottom can't move, and then you spin the bottom one using the same special tool up or down to get it exactly where you need it. Those are typically on sport bikes or the fully adjustable suspensions. The typical off the showroom floor street bike is a ramp type setup. Sometimes there isn't any adjustment at all, and sometimes there may only be 1 or 2 additional selections for preload. So it really depends on your bike. You have to see what you've got. Thank you. So now it's completely dialed in. It did take a couple trials. We have it set at 3 now out of 7, and it is exactly at 1.5 inches of travel. Now, if you end up having to do really big changes, say from one extreme to the other, either front or rear, go ahead and remeasure the other end, because if you make big changes at one end, it does slightly affect the other. We only made very minor changes here, so we're all set. Now that our suspension is set, the bike is level. The bike is at the correct geometry when you're sitting on it. That is super critical to the working of your suspension. Now let's go ahead and do our front rebound and compression damping. You may only have rebound. Now with both rebound and compression damping controls run all the way out, completely on the soft side, this is as most bikes are delivered from the showroom floor. We're going to do a quick bounce test and see exactly how things are operating. Ideally, what we're looking for is the front suspension to compress down when we push on it. It's going to come back up on its own at a very nice, controlled but quick rate, and then settle with no additional springiness. Now this is a little tricky to do. If you're a bigger guy like me, it gets easier. If you aren't a big guy, or if you have a very heavy bike, definitely get a friend to help steady the bike. They can just hold on to the back and keep it upright. What you want to do is put it on the side stand side, put yourself on the side stand side, grab the front brake, never let go of the brake, balance the bike on your hip. Get it nice and centered, but of course don't drop the bike. What we're going to do is bounce it as hard as we can down. We want to force our weight directly down the shocks. We're not going to press down onto the ground, and we're not going to go forward. We're going to push the forks and compress them. Before you do that, get yourself a little momentum. Come back up all the way. When you reach the bottom, release tension in your arms, because you want the bike itself to come back up on its own. Do not pull it back up. We want to see how it's behaving. So we want to force it down, and then at the bottom of the stroke, very quickly, just kind of relax your arms. Just steady the bike, but don't keep it from bouncing back up. And we're looking at how the front forks respond. Again, we're not looking for any springiness. We want it to come down when we push, come back up smoothly, and stop. That's the ideal setting. This is going to take a little bit of trial and error, and you may adjust it 1 or 2 clicks once you actually ride it on the road. So here we go. This is, again, showroom condition, no damping. I got about 3 bounces. Goes down, up, down, up, down. That does not give a great feeling on the street. That can give you that kind of pogo feeling. So let's go ahead and give it some rebound damping, and we're looking to control that pogo effect. We want it to just settle. So we're at 14 out of 14 right now. Let's put it right in the middle at 7 and see how it responds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right in the middle. Retest. Front brake, balance it, looking for the bounces. Still a bit much. It's controlled now, but we still have it come back up and come back down a significant amount, good 1/4 inch. Let's try a few more clicks. Now we're at 4 clicks out of 14. Retest. Better. Not bad. Definitely no springiness. Let's keep going in, see what the difference is. Let's run all the way in, see what the difference is. So we're at 4 now. 3, 2, 1. This is all the way in. Okay, there's no springiness, but what you notice now is the speed is slower. We don't want that. We don't want it artificially slowed. We want that fine line between it operating at full speed, but no bounce. You can see it's just lethargic right there at the end. So now what you can do is just go in 1-click increments. Retest, see where that magic point is. There's probably going to be a 2 or 3 click range where you really can't tell the difference. That's where a quick ride on the street and carrying a screwdriver in your pocket to make 1-click adjustments, go up and down a little stretch of road, see if you can determine, hey, this one's a little bit, treat it like an eye test. Is A better? Is B better? That's all it takes. There's no exact one perfect setup for the street. There's going to be a range. So that's where the personal preference comes in. Here's 3. I'll see if I can note any difference between 3 and 4. I'll tell you right now, I probably won't. Okay, so now I'm going to go 1 back out. I know there's no springiness, so what I'm paying attention to is the rate, the speed. If this is any faster, I'll stay at this. A little bit. Just a little bit. Let's go one more out at 5. There'll be a point where it doesn't get any faster, but it starts to get springy. That's when you know you went too far. Okay. Tiny bit of springiness. So I'm going to stay at 4. For this particular bike, it's brand new. The shock oil is, or the fork oil is brand new. That will change slightly over time. This is the most ideal setting. So just to verify where I'm at, I'm going to go all the way in, count back 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now for compression damping, it's a very similar thing you're looking for. You're looking at the rate that the front forks compress. This is apparent in 2 ways on the road. One, when you hit bumps, check out small potholes, rough roads, railroad tracks, anything like that that is going to significantly bump your suspension, and it's an obvious thing. And the other thing is sharp front braking, and you can easily test that on the road by giving it a stab of the front brakes. What you're looking for is it to feel controlled. You don't want it too loose. If this were left all the way out, stabbing this front brake just easily and instantly collapses the front forks. That's not what you want. If it's too hard, it doesn't move. The hydraulics are preventing the spring from actually working. So if it's run in all the way and you give it a front brake stab, it'll just go, it'll move, you know, maybe an inch, maybe 2, and that's it. You want it in the middle of its range. So we are going to set it directly in the middle of the range. I'm going to go 7 clicks out and test on the road. That is going to depend on you doing a little bit of trial and error on your own. And again, carry a screwdriver with you. Go up and down a stretch of road that has some bumps, do some brake testing, make 1-click adjustments, see which is better, A or B, and you'll dial it in, no problem. For damping controls on the rear shock, this is going to greatly depend on your specific bike and model. The 2017 FZ09 MT09 has rebound damping. It is a little flathead screw. It doesn't turn in clicks like the front. There is a range of adjustment, and it's 3 turns total. What we're looking for in the rear rebound damping is it to match the front. It doesn't matter exactly where that setting is out of the book. It has to match the front, because what we want is the bike to rise and fall at the same rate. Remember, damping is controlling the speed of the movement of the suspension. So what we're going to do to test that, and again, if you need a helper for this, just to have them steady the bike, help you out, that's perfectly fine. We're going to balance the bike. We're going to put one hand on the bars, one hand on the seat, not back at the total rear. Put it exactly where you sit. And we're going to be pushing down as hard as we can, looking at the speed of the front versus the rear. If the rear is lethargic, if the front springs back up at a certain rate and the back isn't, it'll be very apparent. That means there is too much damping on the rear and we need to back that screw out, or whatever control you have. So let's check it out. We're going to push down as hard as we can, but again, be careful. If you need a helper, go grab them. Just have them steady the bike from tipping one way or the other. And again, I'm a big guy, so this isn't a big deal, especially on a tiny little light bike like this. I think that should be very apparent on camera, but the front and rear are coming up and down at the same rate. What I'll do now is run it all the way in and all the way out and show you what the differences are. I'm set at 1.5 out of 3 right now, which is actually the way it came from the factory. So here's the rear screw turned all the way out, no rebound damping added. And I can easily feel the back end popping up faster than the front. It's not staying flat and level. Now I'm going to run it all the way in and show you what that looks like. And I should have noted at the beginning, before you have to make any adjustment to it, figure out exactly where you are and write that down as your baseline. So now we're all the way in, fully dampened. We should see the rear slower than the front at this point. It's not only visibly apparent, but it is quite hard to push down right now. It doesn't want to compress as easily. It doesn't feel springy. It feels like I'm pushing down on a watermelon. All right, let's set that back at 1.5 because that's the perfect setting for this particular bike. So there you go, guys. There's my, as easy as I can make it, setup guide for your suspension. It's going to apply to every bike out there. The only major difference is what controls does your bike have available. The more the better for the best control. I promise you, this will give you a so much better total experience on your motorcycle. This is not just about comfort. It is about control. It's about how easily your bike turns. It's about how it corners. It's about stability and safety. Getting back on the throttle after a turn. If your suspension is way out of whack, you can crash. It happens. Now, I'm not a suspension guru. I know just enough to set up a bike on the street in the right range for me. That's it. That's all I'm saying this is. Don't take it as any kind of track day supplement. Look to an expert for that kind of stuff, like Dave Moss. Hope this helps somebody. I do plan on having maybe some more suspension videos for different bikes. I want to hook up with some local people and give them a street setup and get their feedback. I just think it'd be kind of cool to do. One real quick thing I want to take note of, be wary if you go online and you see these are the best settings for this bike. Set your suspension to this. That is BS. That is 100% BS. That's just as much BS as it comes right from the factory. No two bikes in different conditions for different riders at different miles are going to have the exact same settings. You have to dial it in yourself exactly as I showed you. You can see it's nothing hard. This is a very simple procedure. Might cost you a few bucks if you have to buy a spanner for your shock and you need a helper. No big deal. It is so worth it. Please let me know if you do a suspension setup on your bike, what difference it made. How far off was it from correct for you? That's it. See you next time.